Do you think you wrote it better the second time?
I feel like you do some ones actually.
Nah, I don't think so. I was a little bit rushed this time, so.
Do you want to put that line down? Is it right in your eyes?
It is a little bit.
No. It's really pretty.
It is.
Okay, see you later, sunshine. Not bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Days, you know, they're getting dark so early. It makes you feel like it's dinner and bedtime already.
Yeah. I know. Going to bed about 9 o'clock every evening too.
Yeah, I'm like midnight and I'm like, oh, I might read for a bit.
Oh my god.
I'm in there and I go to sleep like 8.
Yeah. I probably would if I don't know, was more organized, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a bit of a night owl. I'm not a morning person whatsoever.
Neither. Oh.
Like, I am terrible.
Yeah, no, I'm not a morning person either.
Oh wow. So what, you're like a 12 hours sleep?
No, honestly, if I don't get 10 hours sleep, I just can't function.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so bad.
Oh, okay.
Then if I'm out drinking, I can be up till like 5 AM and that's all good.
Yeah.
Oh, you could avoid having children for a while.
That's what I always said, like, having kids, I like my sleep and I like my body, so.
Wow. That's really compatible. Yeah, make the most of your lifestyle where you can.
So I've got a question about the assignments.
Yeah.
At the end of it, once we've handed them all in, do you then have the option, let's say this is your lowest score, can you maybe like try and improve on the lowest score bump it up a wee bit? Or
No, so what we have with this new qualification is that if you fail this, I think if you fail an assessment you can redo the assessment.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to go back and check. I'm pretty sure I read something around that because with the old diploma business there was no research whatsoever.
Yeah.
So but I think with this one, if you fail, you can have a chance to go back and redo it.
Okay.
One chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I have offered for you guys was that you send me a draft as well before you submit, like a few days before the due date, so that I can review it.
Yeah.
And give you feedback so that you can actually submit it feeling confident that you're on the right track. It's definitely hard when it's the first essay.
Yeah. I've got to finish it tonight.
Okay. All right. So the first one was the worst. So probably, you know, see what feedback you get on these ones.
Yeah.
And then you'll have a better idea for assessment 2 as to where you need to go with it.
Yeah.
And for assessment 2, the offer will still stand if you want to submit a draft, a week or so before. I will give you feedback on it.
So if we completely cook the first one or this one, we do have a chance to reset.
Yeah. Well, if you fail it, I think you do. I'll have to double check. It's in your program handbook. I don't know if you've got a copy of that. I'm pretty sure I read something about that. Not the student one, program one.
Oh, you find it.
I might just refer to the generic research assessment policy and then. It does say it may provide an opportunity for the student to resubmit work or undertake some other form of assessment. This is at the discretion of the tutor. So it will depend on the circumstances as well. But you guys had the extra week for that essay, so I expect that'll be brilliant. Okay. And then obviously we've still got 2 more to do, so you'll start to get a bit. I think I'm
definitely going to feel better in the next 2 months.
I already feel like I've got these.
Yeah. Well, you guys, because you've been doing heaps before and posts as well.
Yeah.
So remember that the course, like, you have to get 50% in the every assessment, and that includes the course for and post. So I think you're a little bit behind on those.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So chip away at them, okay?
They're so easy as well.
They're not hard. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
yes, maybe you have to put a little bit of thought into them and maybe do a little bit of, research around them, but you should be able to nut that out in under an hour.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
20 minutes. There you go. There's the benchmark. Go Ariana. All right. So anyway, I mean, we've kind of covered quite a lot already, and we are getting towards the, this is the second half of the course, so the workload will probably intensify a little bit in terms of that you've got 2 essays due in the next 8 weeks or so. So we'll get stuck into it. Tonight we're going to look at change management. So this is, when we talk about planning, organising, leading and controlling for the organisation, change management often comes under sort of leading because it's about decision making, transformation, motivating and managing the change process. But it comes into sort of organising in terms of how you structure the organisation. So change management might often be talked about in terms of a restructuring type of process. And that's about how you coordinate people in groups within the organisation. So tonight we're going to look at the processes for change, whether we use incremental or transformational change, and how we can overcome sort of resistance to change within the organisation. And I quite like this one. We're hiring a director of change management to help employees embrace strategic changes. Or we could come up with strategies that make sense. Then employees would embrace the change. That sounds harder. So, that's just sort of exemplifying, the processes that go on in large organisations, the kind of effort and resources that go into managing change can be quite significant. And that concept that, not everyone's always going to agree with the changes that are necessarily being implemented. And you can meet that staff resistance in terms of, well, that doesn't make sense, or I don't understand why we're doing that, or how's that going to work for me personally, So, processes for change. So this is, out. Any questions about change before we get into it? Has anyone gone through significant organisational change? You have?
Yeah.
You're going through, we're constantly going through it.
Transitioning through it.
Yeah, you're transitioning, we're in the midst of it.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I don't think so. Oh, possibly, but not really.
I've heard change managers.
You've heard change managers? Yeah, it still can be
Kind of.
reasonably unsettling for staff, but in terms of changing, like job descriptions or departmental reporting lines and those sorts of things, it's probably more likely to happen in a larger organisation.
Yeah, my job description changed because I got like a higher role, but it was easier, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Okay. Right. Oh, but that still, how they manage that change in job description for you could be, the difference between it being a really stressful process versus being a really straightforward sort of process. So change management usually involves all levels of the organisation, and we've talked about top level management and strategic planning. And so often the change will fall out of the top level management doing the environmental analysis, evaluating the internal organisation, identifying where we want to be in 5 to 10 years' time, where we are now, what we need to change in order to get there, right? And then that filters down into specific decisions at departmental and then individual levels. So the change management certainly links back into those high-level management decision-making. So in terms of the processes for change, there's some different assumptions around how change happens. One is that there's a rational approach. That's what I've just described, that strategy comes first and is top-driven. We have people who make sensible decisions for the organisation. And they agree as to what the best outcome should be and the best way of achieving that strategy. Okay, that is described as the sort of rational approach. And when we talked about bureaucratic management and Max Faber earlier on in the course, he was a real proponent for the rational approach to managing an organisation. So it should be a rational decision-making process where we can come up with the best possible solutions. Does it really happen like that? maybe. Sometimes there are events that sort of that change that process. So we also could describe a learning perspective. So from a learning perspective, the change sort of evolves and the change changes as we go through the change process. So it can be really unpredictable. It may not be as rational as we thought it was going to be. So it's not always clear how the change is going to occur, and it's possible that it needs to, the leaders will learn that they actually have to adapt their strategies as they go on through that process. Because once you start to implement change, the consequences might not be necessarily as you expected. So I think we've talked about the learning organisation before, as in the learning organisation is one that looks at how we manage knowledge within the organisation and how we reflect and learn from what's happened and what's occurred. This is basically building on that. The learning perspective would suggest that yes, we can start out with a rational approach, but we have to be adaptive and respond to the feedback that we're getting from the environment and the people that are undergoing the change in order to make that change as successful as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A cognitive perspective looks at the thinking and managing, like the thinking processes that are happening for managers and for employees as well. So we're looking at, is there such a thing as objective reality? Does everybody experience the same change process in the same way? No, not necessarily. We all have different thoughts about it, okay? Bob says, yay, we can, this is exciting, there's so many opportunities going to fall out of this change. And Phil says, oh, here we go again, I don't think we can cope with this, it's going to destroy everything, it's never going to work. So same change, same organisation, but completely different cognitive processes happening, which will affect the experience for those individuals and how they respond to that change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the same, and also, and so it's focused on thinking about how do managers think about the change, so we get managerial buy-in, and we have to get the managers thinking positively about how that change is going to occur, and leading their staff effectively and motivating their staff effectively to engage with that change. Okay, so managers play a key role. So yeah, we need to actually get buy-in. We need to get people thinking positively about the change. So the thinking side of it. There's also a real political perspective. So the political perspective is about the positions within the organisation that people hold, their values, their backgrounds, their beliefs, what they're trying to achieve, and it's a real focus on how the change affects yourself and your ambitions. So everybody's acting in their own best interests from the sort of political perspective. You're trying to hold on to your job, or you're trying to get a higher level job, or you're trying to get better working conditions through the change process. So, the political approach really looks at some of those power differentials that occur, through the change process. So it might be that, people who were in powerful positions, that the level of power that they have changes, and other people within the organisation step up. How do we manage those power differentials between people?
A bit like Game of Thrones.
A bit like Game of Thrones, totally like Game of Thrones. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so those are really different approaches, and they just give us a different way of reflecting on what's happening when we look at organisational change. So we need to consider all aspects, I guess. Questions? The process of change, we're talking about thinking about how much, this is from Hubbard, how much change is needed in the first place. Is it big or is it a small gap? And again, you know, we look at comparing the current organisational performance with the ideal future performance of the organisation. Okay, so, and that will determine whether or not we make small changes or big changes. How widespread does the change need to be? That's focusing on the, is it all through the organisation or is it one departmental area that needs to change? Is it just, you know, is it just marketing department that needs to be reviewed, or is it overall all areas of the organisation that need to be affected? What style of change process is needed? So this is going to be about whether you take a consultative or a directive approach, so an autocratic or a democratic approach. Do you just make the decision and tell staff what the change is, or do you engage staff, ask for feedback, consultation, and get people involved in that making the decisions? And that's actually a continuum, essentially, that we can look at. And when we talk about decision making, did any of you do organisation? No. No. We talk about decision making, you know, you can look at different approaches to decision making being essentially, you know, taking on those ideas of consultative versus autocratic, and you can use situational decision making trees to decide in what scenarios each approach is most useful. You know, it can be useful to take a directive approach if there's high risk involved, and you know, you think that, you know, certain circumstances are in place, but you think that people aren't necessarily going to, you know, you have to implement it quickly. Then you could potentially take that directive, right, this is what we're doing, decisive approach. If you've got a bit of time and you really need people to come on board with the change, then getting that engagement and discussion and consultation and feedback from people is really important. But it's only really going to work if you actually use that feedback that they give you in the process of the change. If you go ahead and do what you were going to do anyway, then you sort of undermine that process. Yeah. How much time does the organisation have? So that's what I just mentioned, that, you know, sometimes it has to be immediate. Sometimes the consequences of not changing are you don't survive. So in order to survive, sometimes you have to actually do that quickly. Otherwise, you can take years to do it. You know, you might take several years to. There's no real crisis. It might be that you know, you can keep this change process going for quite some time, and that's potentially can be quite useful in terms of the change doesn't seem so radical. You can get more engagement from staff in how that change will work, and you can do it more slowly, which is often more accepted by staff. How much resources does the organisation have to implement the change? That's a pretty significant question as well, because change costs money, you know. Getting consultation or the time taken, or if the change involves redundancies and making redundancy payouts, then that's resources that the organisation needs to be able to expend. So you could talk about money, you could talk about capabilities and facilities. You know, okay, so I think we look at the video clip of Sheila Sunday. Yeah, you did? Sheila Sunday, and we talked about the fact that they wanted to go from having, I don't know, how many were they producing? How many cookies were they making? There's a bit of a memory for those.
I can't remember, but I know that they wanted to increase it by a lot.
Like, they wanted to go 4 times?
Yeah, 4 times or 5 times.
Yeah. so they wanted to increase their output of cookies quite significantly. Did they have the resources to do it? Did they have the facilities? Did they have enough ovens? Did they have enough, staff? Did they have enough money to actually to make that change? So they certainly had to consider the resources as an important aspect. So it's useful for the organisation to sort of analyse those factors first and foremost and decide, based on the answers to those questions, we can determine whether or not we go for incremental or transformational change. Questions? Incremental change is those small sort of adjustments and movements in existing operational policies and practices. So it might be, okay, we review policy and procedure and make changes to policy and procedure annually. That's an incremental change. It doesn't have a huge impact on staff. It might still change how they do some things, but not majorly drastic. There's also, I don't know if you've heard of the term sinking lid policy. Some organisations will do that when they are sort of potentially there's a decline in sort of customer demand and things like that. A sinking lid policy is essentially if somebody leaves the organisation, not replacing them.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And it's a way of reducing your staffing naturally.
Yeah.
Without having to make people redundant. Okay, so or do massive restructure.
Yeah.
It's simply going right as that person leaves, we don't replace that person, and essentially we've made that position redundant. And it's used, like I said, it's usually used in times of sort of decline for the organisation. But if a slow change process isn't going to work because the organisation is in crisis or the risks involved are significant, then transformational change is probably going to be required. And transformational change is significant, major change. So, for example, restructuring. Okay, restructuring. Remember when we talked about organisation levels and top level, middle managers, first line managers, and people like that, the workers. Restructuring might involve taking out a layer of management or adding in a layer of management. Okay, so it's really, or could be changing how the departments are organised. So it could be taking them from a functional departmental structure where we're organised by your functions such as marketing, accounting, HR, research and development, production, to a divisional organisational structure. So a divisional organisation structure might be based on geographic location or the product or the service that you provide. Have a look in your textbooks page. We'll probably talk about this again.
I can't remember exactly, but divisional is more when you're like globalising or going on a larger scale, is it?
Divisional will give you more adaptability and flexibility. It tends to
like specialised departments.
Yeah, specialised departments in particular. For functional is areas of expertise and specialisation, so HR, accounting, marketing, research and development. Divisional, you might be, okay, this part of the organisation concentrates on the North Island production.
Yeah.
This part of the organisation concentrates on the South Island. You still have accounting, marketing, HR. It's just that they sit within that sort of divisional area.
Divisional, you've got like different layers of line managers as well. Spread across different.
Yeah, you'll have different levels of line managers in either structure.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the organisation. So if you, have a look.
TVP is divisional, aren't they?
TVP is what? Divisional?
Divisional, aren't they?
We both actually. When you have functional and divisional combined, you end up with a hybrid structure. So a hybrid structure, now I'm just going to confuse you completely, but
They're like a matrix structure.
you're kind of like a matrix structure. A matrix structure is when you have functional and divisional overlaid,
Yeah.
and so then you'd have two reporting lines. So you might have an administrative, you could end up having, like the hospitals do this, they will have a clinical reporting line and a managerial reporting line, and that's when you end up with the matrix structure. Okay, so have a look at page 30. No, here we go. 318 is structure. And I think we do this like maybe in a week or two when we talk about organisation, like just choosing organisation structure, but how can you understand what restructuring is if you don't know what a structure chart looks like? Yeah. So 318, you can see a functional structure at the top, and then the same organisation restructured into a divisional structure. Okay. So functional, research and development, manufacturing, marketing. Divisional, we base it on the product type. Okay, so some, organisations might do that where they say, right, this part focuses on cookie production, this part focuses on cereal production, this part focuses on, drink production. Okay, so that's functional divisional, and divisional can be by product, it can be by geography, it can be by customer, as you can see on page 319.
What's more common?
I don't actually know which is more common. It really is quite specific to the organisation. Like in New Zealand, we have got a lot of smaller organisations which probably tend to be a more functional structure. But as soon as you see larger organisations that, like I said, for us at the Polytech, we are a hybrid structure. If you look at page 321, you can see hybrid. We're hybrid because we have those functional departments. We've got marketing, we've got HR, we've got accounts, and we've got academic services. But we also, had sort of divisions. But so the West Coast faculty, the music and audio faculty, the industry training faculty. So that is actually focused on location and product. Combined. Okay.
It just kind of annoys me because I put in one of my assignments that TVP was a divisional structure, so now I'm going to go back.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, we certainly have features of a divisional structure, but we also have features of a functional structure. And without being in here, I don't even know if we've got a structure chart available, but we used to, but I think it got too complicated.
Yeah, I think there's one on page on Datacom.
Datacom, yeah.
I think I've seen it on that new reports to Hope,
Yeah.
but
I think I used one from one of my.
It might have been one on one of our annual reports or something. Or basic one. But like, as soon as the organisation gets bigger and more complex, to be able to be more adaptive and responsive to change, you probably will start shifting into a divisional sort of approach, and that just helps to coordinate within that particular service or product or location. It can be really hard to coordinate between, we've got the campuses in Auckland and things, to coordinate between Greymouth and Auckland. And this is what organisation structure is helping us to achieve, is that coordination.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, when you start looking at transformational change and how we structure the organisation, the question becomes, how best can we facilitate these particular groups of people to achieve the goals that they need to achieve? Like, if these are the performance targets that they have, are they going to achieve that from having functional expertise or from being able to work closely as in a geographic location or work closely on a particular product? You can see in the text they've got advantages and disadvantages of each of those different types of structures, but I think we will cover that on another day. So the problem, obviously the problem of transformational change is it can be scary and people can respond quite negatively to transformational change unless it's managed well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just got a wee video clip here on change management explained in 1 minute, because who needs a whole hour to explain change management? You can do it in a minute, guys. Now, question, well, it's might have to re-look it up. My hyperlink didn't work.
Modern organisations face constantly varying market conditions, customer demands, technologies, input costs and competition. They must adapt to these shifting forces to avoid being eaten up. Change management is managing the impact that these crucial adaptations can have on an organisation's people. 4 typical responses to change are the critic who opposes the change, the victim who panics, the bystander who ignores the change, and the navigator who's empowered to work with changing circumstances. The challenge for managers is to help people become navigators. Here's some things that we know that help this happen. Number 1, communicate the threat of not changing. Number 2, where possible, involve your team in decision making. Number 3, minimise uncertainty. Number 4, celebrate successes in moving towards the goal. Number 5, keep explaining why we're changing. Remember that when there's an information vacuum, people often assume that managers are plotting terrible things. So number 6, be as transparent as possible. To summarise, organisations must continually adapt in order to survive. To create change navigators, communicate the threat, involve your team, minimise uncertainty, celebrate positive shifts, and be as transparent as possible.
Okay, that was short and sweet. What were those 5 things?
Be transparent.
Be transparent.
Um,
You, Marie, is so fickle.
Communicating.
Communicate.
Communicating.
yeah.
They can't just spit them out all in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fast.
Modern organisations face constantly varying. Celebrate positive shifts and be as transparent.
Celebrate positive shifts.
Possible. To summarise, organisations must continually adapt
Continually
to
adapt.
survive. To create change
Change
navigators,
navigators. Communicate the threat.
involve your team,
Involve the team.
minimise uncertainty,
Minimise uncertainty.
celebrate positive shifts, and be as transparent
It was more than 5 things.
No, that was fun. The first one was must continually adapt. So communicate the threat, communicate something with the team, minimise uncertainty, create positive, and that goes back to you know, Cotter's sort of change management principles essentially, which I think we'll talk about in the next level up course. But you know, you're talking about really managing people's emotional reactions and cognitive processes to the change. So we're talking about overcoming that resistance to change. So why do you think people respond negatively?
I think the unknown scares people. I think people like to know where they're going, so yeah.
Also, people get stuck in old ways as well.
Yeah.
Like they don't like change at all.
They like their own habits because they think it's working, but sometimes they don't realise it's not working.
Yeah.
They have their own opinion. Like everybody has their own opinion and has a different way of dealing with different issues.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, resistance to change is very sort of personal, and it will depend a lot on how it's affecting you personally. You know, if you've got a mortgage and you've got kids and you're the sole breadwinner in the house, then a potential threat to your livelihood is significant. So fear, of course there's going to be fear if you think you might lose your job through the change process. Because often that restructure process results in some kind of changes to job descriptions or job losses and redundancies or job resizing or all those sorts of things. You might be scared of having to do more work. You know, you had to take on a higher level job, but you've got to do less work. Perfect, you know.
It was kind of what I was already doing, but now I just get paid for it.
Yeah, right. But you know, for some people, you know, that might be scary to take on a higher level job. So yeah, how do you think we can overcome some of that resistance to change?
I guess communication.
Yeah.
It's about not communicating to the team.
Yeah.
So negative other people are plotting like bad things against them. Like I guess people don't really think that if it's my word that it's going to be good. Yeah.
You start to brain starts to go to worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So if we can communicate, then we can start to alleviate some of the worst case scenario thoughts.
Yeah.
But we can't guarantee that everybody's going to walk away with a job at the end of the change. So, you know, we also have to be honest with the process. And that's that transparency side of it, you know, we do have to, I think having open, honest, high-level communication about the change and how the change is progressing and how the change, you know, might affect people, but also then putting in place supports for people around that. So you can put them, if you've heard of EAP, Employee Assistance Programs, which are basically counselling programs that you can refer staff to. And the organisation pays for that service, but it can be a support for people to talk about their fears around that process. What else could you do? Giving your organisers.
I think educating people
Yeah.
as to why change needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, like, I know from myself, like, ignorance is bliss when it comes to certain things. So I think
creating a sense of urgency is how it's sometimes referred to, but creating that need for change so that people understand if we don't change, the alternative is, you know, this organisation that doesn't succeed. So, so that sense of urgency is really important to get people to buy into it. It's like if the alternative is that there's no organisation, then nobody's going to have a job. At least if we go through this change process, some of us will have a job, you know. So there's that kind of thinking, I guess. They can, and they talked in that brief about getting consultation into that. So again, that's a process where that helps to overcome that resistance to change because people get buy-in to the decisions that are made at the end of the day. So they feel like they are part of the process, not just having their lives
even just
decided.
taking everyone's opinions maybe and like trying to reach a bit of a middle ground.
Yeah, middle ground, yeah. Exactly, that's right. And it can be really valuable to you get a lot of information from employees on the ground if you're in management, you know, that you don't necessarily have. Have you heard of the change? Oh, this is kind of one sort of model. It's sort of based on the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross grief cycle. I don't know if you've heard of the grief cycle from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Well, basically, you know, when we hear there's going to be change, we sort of resist it, feel anger, fear, and then we eventually, you know, so there's that initial, like we've just fallen off a cliff response, you know. So initially there's a lot of, you know, there's denial, then there's, I think there's denial, then it's anger, then it's fear. Is it that way around? The other way around. Fear, then anger. Denial, anger, fear, acceptance, and then sort of integration into your way of life. So you Google the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross cycle, but this is sort of based on that. We initially fall off the cliff, we fight it, we argue, we hate it, we don't want to be a part of it, and then we start to come around and go, okay, well, we're going to have to deal with it. All right, how are we going to deal with it? Okay, maybe, hey, actually that's kind of exciting, I kind of like that idea. Oh, look at that, the change has happened. Okay. Okay. So, it takes time, but the point of managing the change is to try and reduce the amount of time that we have that level of resistance, because during this time, productivity is really low. So you can see that column up there is performance.
Yeah.
So performance just drops away when everybody's in the throes of the panic and the fear and the anger and the denial, we really need to move people quickly into acceptance, integration. I think in the video they called it, what do they call it? Change. Oh, I can't remember. Those people at the very end who are happy about the change, the change, the change, they become the change agents for the organisation. So they become the people who, really are positive and, other people look up to and start to model themselves on. So we need those role models. So communication and education, participation, negotiation. We can sort of coerce people into change. Sometimes there is no other option. So that just becomes a part of it. But also putting in top management support. So we really want to build on coming from the top level, putting in place support. So sometimes that might involve also sort of educational programs like writing your CV, preparing for life on the outside of the organisation, making people feel confident that they can cope with a job loss if that is what ends up happening for them themselves. So people can do workshops, get specialists in, whatever. There's all sorts of options there. There's another web video. This one's organisational change at Yahoo. I don't even know if Yahoo still exists. This one. I have no idea. Yahoo! That was our work.
I think the greatest asset for Yahoo 7 is definitely that it is the global brand. However, locally it's the joint venture that we have with 7 Media Group. It makes us a very, very strong entity here in the local market.
Yahoo 7 has now 3 years. It's now 3 years old. So we are still a very young corporation, but I think we learned a lot and we learned very fast. First of all, to merge 2 operations, it's not easy. To merge 2 operations, one coming from America with a strong American culture and one with a strong Australian culture, it's also a challenge, so 2 different countries. And the other thing is one corporation that is very focused on the broadcast media and the other one that is very focused on the new media and the internet media. But, from the conflict, we came with a lot of knowledge, we produced a lot of knowledge, and I think that the main thing to make it succeed was the willingness of both partners to really make it happen and to make it work. After we realized that we need to build a new entity that has their own personality and that, yes, as main shareholders, Yahoo and 7, but it is Yahoo 7, it's not Yahoo and it's not 7. So I think when we reach this tipping point, we definitely succeed much more, much faster. And today, after 3 years, I could say that yes, we have a very successful joint venture.
We're in a place now where we're able to achieve so much more than what we could have, 3 years ago as 2 separate companies. Neither one had the ability to achieve what we're now able to achieve.
To be prepared for change, we need to have always people with different skills, because at the end of the day, it's all about the flexibility that the organization has to move around and to change directions very fast. If you have good foundations and you know your long-term strategy, it will be easier to move everybody into different directions and to change people without facing too much resistance business. That's the other thing. We need to have a culture that fosters innovation and adaptability. Otherwise, you know, we'll have resistance, and resistance, it means that we need more time to change and you need more time to move the big elephant. We had obviously this case where we needed to change structures and we need to move things around. At Yahoo 7, I can mention a big one 2 years ago when we used to have all our product engineering, designer teams, web developers all in separate teams, so all centralized teams for each of those disciplines. And at some point we thought that this was bringing us to a silo approach instead of a cooperative approach. So we kind of reorganized the teams in what we call business units by classifying the products into communications, media products, search products, and each of those business units have now people from product, from design, from engineering, and everybody can contribute to the same time. The final output, though, for us was that we had people much more passionate about what they were doing, because they were not assigned to one day to work in the news project and in the other day in the search project. So it doesn't mean that we don't change people around. It just means that you have a sense of achievement. You have a sense of starting, doing the project and ending a project. And I think this was fully achieved with this reorganization.
Okay, so did you get that? It's a bit, the music's like, I don't want to put music on.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Like just talk, because actually that's what we need.
Yeah.
So what sort of structure changes are there? They talked about two big changes really, actually.
We merged.
They merged, yeah. So we merged two organisations, Yahoo and 7, into one. So that's a big change for staff to get their heads around. Like we just had mains shifted up to SIT from TPP.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. So we don't have music and audio institute anymore. It's gone to SIT, but that's a huge shift for those staff working at mains and for SIT.
Did that have something to do with all the stuff that went down at the start of the year? But they were saying that they were going to have to merge TPP with someplace down south.
Oh, SIT.
No.
Oh, that was our EER report from NZQA from last year.
Okay.
No, that wasn't actually did that. It was decided previously.
Yeah, so like last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really?
But anyway, because that change, so that change in and of itself will have taken quite some time.
Yeah.
To be implemented in January, there would have been quite a big build up to that to actually make it happen. But yeah, so Yahoo and 7 merged, and then what was the other change that they talked about with
The department.
the departmental structure as well? So they went from having like those different areas, the web design, the production, all those sorts of things separate, working in silos, to actually we're going to focus on this particular product. You guys are going to do media, you guys are going to do communications, you guys are going to do web, and you have those specialists within each team. Okay. So taking it to a more divisional approach. And did they talk about anything that worked for them in terms of managing their change?
I don't know, did we actually? We just talked about the changes.
Talked about the changes, but talked about initially the sort of trying to integrate the cultures as well, like American culture and Australian culture, because they're
Two different countries.
Yeah, totally. So actually, having to get people working together and facilitating that sense of we're one company. Quite hard. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that video?
The guy's hard to understand.
Yeah, so there was a bit of an accent. Yeah. He wasn't American or Australian.
No, he was something.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, I'll put that up so you can watch it again if you want to, but it's just sort of exemplifying some of that rather more transformational change and how that can sort of work, I guess. Questions? This Prestige. Right, you have got a couple of readings to do. Readings 8.1 and 8.2 around incremental change and managing change. There's an audio of Jim Riley talking about change management. But I don't think there's any discussion forum activity for this week, so you have a slight reprieve there to try and catch up. Okay. Yeah. Catch up, because get that assignment 1 into me tonight, catch up on your course forums, and then next week we'll see if we're ready to hand out the next assessment.
This is coming so quick.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, change management is a really interesting one. There's a lot more depth you can go into, obviously, with that particular topic. And if you go on to study high level, you get more into it. But definitely a really important aspect of managing the organisation, essentially, and leadership. And you can probably, think about some of those principles even in your own lives and personally, or with, how do you manage big changes for yourself, or how do you manage changes in your family, and those sorts of things. So it all comes into, some of the things that we've talked about there. How you communicate and manage that resistance and manage that denial, the anger, the fear. Try and make it not as scary as it potentially could be. Okay. All right. We'll see you next week. Next week, I don't know what we're doing. Something. Doing something. Oh yeah. Open with change, and then we go on to ethics. That's what the next assignment is about, is ethics. That's all interesting. Oh, yeah, my earrings. Oh, now. Lucky. Lucky I have it here, not outside.
I have a question about this essay.
Yeah.
And it might be a dumb question. Well,